What's going on, guys? Dustin with Costly Hobby here, and today Peter Piper is picking a project out of the pile. And the best way to do that, of course, is going eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's go. All right, guys, this is my 1987 Ford Bronco that I picked up off Marketplace for like $500 last year. I started sanding it down because I was planning on just doing a quick paint job and flip, but you know, life happens. So now it's sat outside for the last year, packed on a lot of surface rust, absolutely full of snow, just in way worse condition than when I left it, but that's okay. I've got 4 flat tires all the way around, and the pieces to it are who knows where. My goal is to drag this into the shop, throw on some new wheels, get the paint job done, put it back together, and just see if we can breathe a little bit of a new life back into this thing. But first, we got to get it running again, so I brought the trusty jerry can. Let's see what we can do. Of course, we've got no battery, no air cleaner. Give me a sec, I'll be right back. If I remember correctly, this thing actually used to run. Let's give it a little bit of go juice there. Spill everywhere, as you do. Fire it over. Whoops. Sorry about that, guys. Looks like you had one too many. Well, we killed it. And unfortunately, I don't have a booster pack, and I don't feel like bringing the Dodge around here. I'm just going to go throw this on a trickle charger for a little bit, and we'll come back a little later. All right, you got me. I changed my mind. I figure it's too cold out here. Might as well just get it done. Plus, I had to move the truck anyway, so. Oh, I do have a bit of an overheating problem if you guys follow my stories, so I can't let this idle for too long, but we'll get it hooked up, see what we can do. That'll be enough. Interesting thing about this one, you turn the key on, but then if you start, it doesn't do anything. So you actually have to push this little go button. Why isn't my go button working? Oh, no wonder. I forgot I already disconnected my cables. See, that was positive. That one's negative. "17th time is a charm." Keys on. Come on. Drink. There we go. Nope, come on. Stay going. Stay going. Probably got none in the tank.
It ain't got no gas in it.
we go. There we go. Now we're pulling from the tank, kinda. Who'd have thought? Forgot my e-brake was on, went a little sideways and left a scratch on the square body. What a shame. All right guys, I finally got the Bronco into the shop, so I'm gonna give you a really quick introduction to it. And then as you can see, I need to let this thing sit long enough for all the snow and water to melt so that I actually have a dry surface to work with. All right, so if we look under the hood, you can see that it's not powered by anything special. We got a bone stock 351. I put a cleaned up carburetor on it, but that doesn't work. I'm disconnected from half of everything under here. All my vacuum lines are completely disconnected. My air conditioner is just sort of floating there. Oh, lost an oil plug. Oops. No, that's another day's problem. Disconnect my battery because I'm pretty sure I have a power draw somewhere. I am missing a whole lot of front end pieces, the bumper, the grille, the headlights, just kind of everything up there. I found out I do actually have one good tire holding air, but as you can see, I've got some rust problems I need to sort out. The interior on this junk is actually pretty nice. We've got one little tear on the driver's seat. The door panel needs to be mounted. Other than that, it's got everything. Headliner's a little saggy, but what isn't? All in all, it's pretty good. So I just gotta kind of clean it up a little bit. I noticed the windows have this really icky residue on it that I don't know what that's from, but whatever. All right, and that's really it. I don't know anything else about this thing. It's just sat outside for about a year or two. So I'm just gonna let this thing sit overnight, get dry, and I'll come back to it tomorrow morning. So, admittedly, it took me a little bit longer than overnight to get back to the Bronco. But the good news is my ADHD brain only overshot it by about 400 days. But what can I say? I am the world's worst procrastinator. Now, when we left off, I was waiting for the Bronco to dry so that I could get to prepping the surface for primer and paint, which should be a pretty quick job, except for now it's got even more surface rust than when we last saw it. However, over the last year, I have used one tool over and over and over again, and you know it as the best tool in my arsenal still today, the drum sander. You saw me do the bare metal Lincoln in this thing and it turned out awesome. I have used it countless times since then, and it's gonna be the best thing to get the surface of this thing prepped. Mostly good enough to throw a high build primer on there. So, let's go. Now we're just doing a really quick and dirty prep on this thing because it's nothing special, it's a budget unit. So I've got an old 80 grit burnishing wheel on there. I'm gonna run over the entire surface, which should only take me about half an hour, maybe an hour if I'm really taking my time to get the entire thing prepped. And then we should be ready to maybe do a quick 300 grit sand, or maybe we'll just jump straight to primer. I don't know, but I'll show you the highlights, like getting started. And that's really that. I got all of the surface rust off in probably only like 20 minutes, if I'm being honest. And you're probably looking at this going, man, that's not prepped at all. What is this guy even thinking? And I am admittedly going to be extremely generous with some high build primer, but I am gonna go over it with a 2 or maybe even a 300 after that grit sandpaper, just to knock down some of the differences in level here so that I don't have to have as thick of a coat of primer, but I'll probably lay it on really heavy anyways because I have to do an epoxy primer, and then I'm gonna go back with a urethane high build, high solids primer to really fill in all of these imperfections. I might actually even try a roll-on primer, which I've wanted to check out lately, so we'll see what happens, but I'm not gonna bore you with sanding this thing again, so I will jump right into when I get the primer materials. And we're ready. So I've got a brand new HVLP 1.8 millimeter spray gun from Princess Auto, which is what you guys in the States would call Harbor Freight, even though, fun fact, Princess Auto came first. Then I'm using this high build primer by Global. This is actually the body shop that sold it to me. This is a 4-to-1 urethane primer that is direct to metal, so we can throw it on every surface there and it's gonna be just fine. I'll probably do 3-4 coats of it just to really build it up. Of course, I've got my mixing cups. I like to mix it almost a half gallon at a time and then just use this progressively as I'm spraying so that I don't have to keep pausing and mixing and pausing and mixing, because I used to do that, but it wasn't very efficient. Hardener, of course. I'm gonna, for the first time ever, try out a cover thing so that I'm not ruining my clothes, but they only came in 2XL. I don't know if that's like the standard fits over all of your clothes or what. And then I've got some screens that were just in the shelf, and apparently you should still screen high build primer, so I don't think I did that last time, but that's it. That's really all there is to it, and we're gonna get started. I'm probably gonna have my wife help me out because I only have this hand. Now, before I even get into the primer prepping process, I am going to give it a final wipe down with some wax and grease remover and a microfiber cloth. Now, normally a guy would want to maybe tack cloth this. I'm not going to go that far. I'm not too worried about it. I think it's going to be just fine. Now, the reason I start doing this before I even start prepping the primer is because this wax and grease remover is really strong and has some crazy chemical components that will react with that urethane primer and make it start bubbling and fish-eyeing and not really bond to our metal really well. And that would be a complete waste of time. So I'm gonna give it a wipe down with wax and grease remover, and then to let it off gas, I'll give it the time while I mix the primer and obviously start recording more stuff, because this is what takes the most time. Really quick, one tip I can give you when you are doing your final wax and grease wipe down is make sure that every panel you're swapping which square of the rag you're using. That way, look at all of this dirt and dust that just got on there overnight. That is just gonna get wiped all around if you stay with this. So yeah, just keep swapping this out. Do this one fender, do this one on a door, and just keep folding it and swap out rags once in a while. I have nothing to say about this. Always wear your mask, because we are dealing with cancerous materials. I'm kind of hoping that the mask will keep the suit properly positioned on my face. Okay, and I am finally ready to start mixing primer, and I sound a little bit like James Earl Jones here, but that's okay. I like to mix a half gallon or so of primer at a time. This mix is about 4-to-1, so 4 parts urethane primer, 1 part activator. So we're gonna throw that into the cup here, and that way I can get all of my first coat done without having to remix, ideally. So I'm just gonna look for my 4-to-1 here, and I can just ignore that part because I'm not putting in a reducer, and we'll just go 4-to-1. So I'm gonna mix it all the way up to like the 5, and then my hardener is gonna go up to the 5 here. And right about there. Okay. So we'll grab our hardener. We'll mix that right up to that 5.
Give it a good stir. Gotta make sure it's really well mixed. Okay, and we are ready to get this strained into the gun so that we can spray. And I have my wife helping me because I only have two hands and I can't hold everything at once. And I've dismantled all of my gun holders for their magnets. So, there we go. I always get these things on sideways and then they pour all over me. Okay. That looks pretty good to me, nice and sealed. Okay. We're ready to go. It's action time. Cardboard box. Well, that'll work. So, test your spray pattern. Oh. Alright, that's not too bad actually. It's a little thick there. I think we want this side. Yeah. Yeah, alright, that'll do. So I'm running my gun about 14 PSI, and we'll just see how it goes. I don't know. Start on this side. I always like to do a bit of a top down so that I'm not leaning on my already sprayed work, because that sucks. But pretty simple, just keep level and go. Oh my goodness, I have no balance. The good thing about primer is it can be very forgiving. Plus we have to block sand it down anyway. Not a lot of room to work in here. Okay, and that's all that's it for coat one. So I'll go around it and do a second coat on it after about 10-15 minutes to let it flash off. Even though it technically took me like 30 minutes to get around it, I still like to give it that extra 10 just in case so it doesn't bubble or peel or, you know, all the things that paint can do. So 10 minutes, I'll go around, give it one more coat. I'll probably throw that on a time lapse or something really quick for you guys. And then let it dry overnight, and I'll have to come back and block sand it tomorrow, or in 6 weeks when I actually get to it.
Okay. Ugh. Emerge from my turtleneck here. That is 3 very heavy coats of high build primer, which is pretty much like spraying filler directly onto the panels. So I'm gonna let that dry overnight, maybe even a little bit longer, just to make sure that there are no tacky spots when we go to wet sand it. And we'll hit it with that 600 grit, smooth it all out, get rid of all of the runs that I put into it just to make sure that every little scratch was completely filled. Then we're on to paint. We'll see you guys later. Okay, the primer's dry and we are finally on to block sanding. We are so close to paint, it's not even funny. I hate this part passionately, but I got some water, I got some 320 grit, then we'll go over it again with some either 4 or maybe 600 grit to take out those scratches. But first I wanted to knock down all of the runs, all of that high build primer, get it nice and laser smooth, or at least as good as we can. I've got one of these little, like, it's a flexible sponge. Technically I think it's like 400 grit on its own, but I don't do that. So purple sandpaper, make it wet, go to town. Pump it up. So guys, as absolutely riveting as block sanding is, I was stitching together this video, and if I'm being honest, it was a little bit more boring than I typically like my stuff to be. This is actually the first time I have ever felt bored while editing one of my videos, and that's not great for either of us. So I think I'm gonna make this a 2-part video. I'm gonna finish this one off after I get this one totally smoothed out, and then I'll come back and in another video, I will start it off with painting it and then getting it assembled, because that's the cool part, and I think that's the video that everyone's gonna like more anyway. So if you made it this far, thanks so much. You're a real trooper. But if you didn't, no harm, no foul. I wasn't a big fan of this video either, if I'm being honest. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead, probably throw you on a quick time lapse or something. All I do is I get the surface all nice and wet. You guys know how wet sanding works, you know. Wet, 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 wet. Sand, sand, sand. You know, long strokes and all that. You get it, you get it. So that's what I'm gonna be doing for the next 7 years of my life, apparently, to get this nice and smooth. Time lapse, here we come. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our block sanding expedition. I am soaking wet. Bronco's soaking wet. The shop is an absolute mess, and my fingers are like little tiny raisins. Nice. So, like I said, I think I'm gonna make this one a 2-parter purely because this needs to dry. It's a total mess in here. While I was spraying water, I got so much of the masking totally ruined. So I'm gonna have to redo that, and that's not gonna be fun to watch a second time. So I think what I'll do is I'll end this one here, and then I will cut ahead and I'll do a second part that starts after I've got it already masked and prepped and everything like that, and we can just jump right into paint. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, if you love car content and hot rod culture, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. It's very small. I am the worst poster in the world, but sometimes I do cool stuff. So hey, stick around and maybe I'll do something cooler next time. See you in part 2.